Unironically, dynamic encounters are really great. And when I say dynamic encounters are really great, I do not mean for one moment that I think they are perfect. They actually leave a little to be desired when it comes to the implementation of the loot that they generate, but that's for later on. I want to do a positive video about something that I have been stewing about since it was actually announced. Dynamic encounters are actually really great because I think they solve a problem that Star Wars: The Old Republic has had for the past few years. Something that's really bugged me and something that has been, I think, tearing the game apart since they decided to go in this direction. And that is the change from turning this game from an MMO to it more feeling like a single-player RPG. This really happened back when they first did Knights of the Eternal Throne and Knights of the Fallen Empire, when they really decided to focus on the story they were telling and switching the game to this kind of single-player RPG instead of having these individual stories. And the reason why they do these individual stories is something I'm going to cover in a later video. But one of the big things that I think gets glossed over when people talk about Star Wars: The Old Republic is that it doesn't feel like an MMO anymore. See, there's something about MMOs that I've always kind of had a problem with since I first started playing them, and that is the concept of solo players. Now, don't get me wrong, I think solo players absolutely have a place in an MMOs community. In fact, I think the majority of people who play MMOs are solo players. But I think that is a big problem when the game decides to focus on solo play. Of course, having single player class storylines in the game is a fantastic addition, even though I think from a design aspect, single player class storylines are actually pretty bad for the game. Again, something I'll discuss later, but there is always a feeling that the solo class storylines and those individual storylines are completely different from the MMO aspects of the game. For example, back in the beginning of Star Wars: The Old Republic, heroic missions were things you had to get groups together to do. There was no such thing as soloing a heroic mission until you got to late game. When you're running into heroic missions early on in the game, they were heroic 2s and 4s. So you had some pretty difficult missions that you actually needed a group to do. This extended to flashpoints. Flashpoints were something where you actually needed group composition in the beginning of the game's lifespan, and for a while that actually was something that they maybe toned down a little bit, but it was something that you really needed a group to do. You couldn't go and solo a flashpoint until you were way past the point of it being useful. But now flashpoints have solo modes. This, in addition to them practically de-incentivizing world PvP, has had a massive effect on the game in one crucial aspect. The game feels empty. Hello! If you aren't at a spaceport, or if you aren't at one of the various planetary hubs or on a starter planet, the game does not feel alive anymore. Even if you are on a populated server, the game definitely feels like there's just not a lot of people around. There are lots of parts of the game where you just walk around and there's not a single person to be found. And I think that is the true problem. And I think that's really what is the death of an MMO, is not just being empty, but feeling empty. Because when it feels empty, you don't want to be there. And that just serves to feed into the cycle of the game actually being empty. But dynamic encounters kind of fixes that. Maybe not entirely, but it definitely adds something to the world and makes it feel alive again. Every single time I am doing dynamic encounters, it feels like an MMO again. Every single time I turn around, there's people doing them. I'm never doing dynamic encounters alone, whether I'm on a starter planet, or if I'm on Ilum, or if I'm on a mid-game planet. The game feels alive again. And I think that's something that needs to be focused on if Star Wars: The Old Republic is to survive. That, and we need a new class in the game. I'm not even kidding. If you think the game doesn't need a new class, you're out of touch. But again, unironically, dynamic encounters are a fantastic addition to the game. They make the game feel alive again. They make the game feel like there's an actual player base. I don't think it's enough to get people back into the game, but it's definitely enough to kind of stave off the slow entropy that I think the game is in. One of the only things I think where dynamic encounters kind of falls short is that I don't think they're rewarding enough. And don't get me wrong, it's an MMO. mostly, so I understand the need for grind. I will grind my face off for something I really want to do in an MMO. But I think there's something to be said on the fact that it doesn't feel rewarding enough. Decorations are great, and the mounts that you're supposed to be getting off for the starter planets for doing the dynamic encounters are fantastic. But what I would love to see is something else added to the loot pool of dynamic encounters. They took a lot of the old bronze item cartel market items from the cartel market in like the last patch before this one, and I think it was a great opportunity to add those to the dynamic encounters loot pool. They did design a bunch of cosmetics like for the hidden chain specific events, and there is some armor and stuff you can get there, but I would love to see more of that. One of the things that's always bugged me about Star Wars: The Old Republic is it never really feels like the game rewards you for the time you spend grinding your face off. Like, you never look at someone with a mount or a piece of gear and go, oh wow, they really did a thing to go and get that. Where in other games, there is typically something that you look at and you're like, holy frick, I know exactly what they did to get that. And I think Star Wars: The Old Republic is missing that. But overall, I love dynamic encounters. They're a great addition to the game, and I can't wait to see what Broadsword adds to them in the future. And I hope they keep adding more, make them more difficult, maybe add tiers, and make better bosses to go along with it as well. But that's it for this video, guys. It was very short. But thank you guys for showing up to the channel. Like and subscribe if you guys want more Star Wars: The Old Republic and gaming content in the future. Remember, never trust a hut. Always save the blue Twi'leks. Retor Shami, and may the Force serve you well.